Mr. George Bessel had always considered his mind an exquisite instrument, keen enough to split hairs of logic, no coarser than moon dust. Yet, on a raw November evening in 1896, he found the entire mechanisms, prejudices, faiths, and rocking upon a single thought. What if personality can be detached from flesh as easily as light is refracted from glass? That notion, so fantastic at first encounter, had seeped into him by stage papers of the Psychical Research Society, half-credible séance reports, the blue-rimmed flame of fascination in young Edward Vincey's eyes. And now, here in his rooms at the Albany, Piccadilly, the idea passed beyond parlour speculation. It had become an experiment scheduled for 8 o'clock precisely. A gust rattled the tall sash windows, coal fire sputtered, issuing a sulphurous sigh. Bessel crossed to the escritoire, laid down his pocket watch beside 2 nickel-plated hypnotic mirrors, and drew a dark curtain over a cluster of lamps until the room swam in amber dusk. Somewhere in Staple Inn, 2 miles east, Vincey would be performing the twin arrangement lamps hooded, mirrors aligned. At the appointed stroke, each man would clap, shut his eyes, submerge himself in auto-hypnosis, then fix consciousness upon the other, willing a projection of self across London's convoluted arteries. Bessel considered himself better prepared than his student partner. Years of private mesmerism had given him a supple command of inner theatres, and he had practiced a silent mantra outside the bones, beyond the blood until the phrase floated in his head like a lifebuoy. He seated himself in a leather wing chair, feet firm on the tiger skin rug, hands cupped upon the chair arms, breaths timed to the pendulum squeak of the half-hidden clock. There was no narcotic, no hocus-pocus insensee, only the mind, stripped bare and set upon the unlikely. Tick. Outside. Tock. The bones. Seconds slipped into velvet minutes. The crackle of coal receded. So too the ache behind his eyes. Instead, he sensed himself spreading a slow, painless diffusion, as though the fibers of muscle were giving way to vapor. With a final inward gasp, Bessel willed himself forward and the chair was empty. He experienced at first no bodily outline at all, only a majestic expansion, like mist filling a cathedral nave. Below lay London, miniature and intricate, roof lines twinkling beneath a new-risen moon, handsome lamps bobbing like fireflies. Yet he did not merely see streets. He saw through them, through slate and brick, into the lamplit interiors of dining rooms, billiard, halls, counting, houses shut for the night. Lives mounted upon lives in a vast honeycomb, each cell bursting with motion, soundless yet distinct. It came to Bessel that he had slipped into some broader dimension where the partitions of matter were diaphanous screens. Joy pure, astonished joy swept him. He had done it. The weightless exhilaration of a child's first leap off a riverbank sang in his vein-sif, veins he still possessed. I shall visit Vincey forthwith. He turned, or rather bent this attention eastward. In that instant the exultation faltered. For something wholly unforeseen pressed upon him, a crowding presence, a multitude of half-shapes lurking in the peripheral murk. They were not men. Faces formed and dissolved, each a pallid blur of eyes gleaming with hungry inquiry, hands stretched like parchment claws, yet never reached, held back as later he would say by a kind of breathable glass. He forced resolve, streaming ahead in a grey wind that smelled faintly of poppies gone sour. Landmarks whisked beneath the glittered ribbon of Regent Street, the black yaw of Charing Cross Road and then Staple Inn, its quadrangles aglow with gas standards. He plunged downward, passing the brick without resistance, and there sat Vincey in a Morris chair, head lolled, mouth ajar in trance. Bessel attempted speech, but his words emerged as silent ripples. Desperate, he lifted an intangible hand to touch Vincey's shoulder. Resistancia springy panathwarted him. He remembered a plan B. Stimulate the pineal focus, that mysterious third-eye structure occultists adored. Teasing past the ghostly membrane, he tapped the glowing node in Vincey's head. Vincey flinched, eyes flying wide, for a heartbeat teacher and pupil stared across an abyss narrower than a thought. Then, outside Vincey's window, Big Ben tolled 9 and a hot wind of terror smashed into Bessel. Something snapped. Senses tumbled. The spectral mob surged like wolves scenting blood. He reeled if reeling be possible in airless, bodiless space. And a single conviction burst through the din. Return. He fled, shadows clawing, laughter without sound chasing his wake. The Albany sitting room was wrong. Furniture lay higgledy, statuettes smashed, champagne spattered like arterial gore across parquet. Smoke eddied from the grate where torn chintz smouldered. Yet far worse, in the center of that wreckage stood his own body, upright, anonymity occupied. The eyes were his yet not, the smile, a lunatic rictus. Bessel hurled himself at the shell, collided with the invisible panny and bounced, powerless, watching as the intruder flexed fingers, tested limbs, and burst into manic cackling. With a cat-like bound, the creature wearing Bessel's flesh sprang for the door, leaving destruction in its wake. Rage and dread entwined in Bessel's vaporous chest. Faces of the unseen audience hovered, smirking. He spun, seeking a pathway back to the living world, but the pain was set-unyielding as diamond. He understood then the true peril of their experiment. The vacancy he had so carefully crafted invited not his own return but any waiting tenant of that Limboany hungry intelligence hemorrhaged from unthinkable sources. The hours that followed were stitched into him forever, a macabre chase through London's spiritual underalleys. He glimpsed the stolen body rampaging Piccadilly, mad with the flavor of blood-warm life swinging a broken magnum, splashing colza oil aflame, shrieking one exultant word over and over. Life! Life! He could only watch, impotent, as policemen fell, as a flower seller crumpled under the cane's blow, as glasswork exploded in Tottenham Court Road under sprays of flaming paraffin. He battered every receptive consciousness he could find. Vincey's, Hart's, even the porter's mute astonishment each, a fleeting flicker of recognition drowned in confusion. He tried to seize another vacant body. Any vacancy yet, each living form was sealed by the same crystalline film. Only once did he succeed in steering Vincey's step, luring him into Covent Garden just as the possessed Bessel came careering round the corner. But Vincey, startled, received a lash of the stick and collapsed. The counterfeit escaped, still hooting. Despair chilled the disembodied soul. In Covent Garden, dawn greyed the sky. Bessel found himself among other intangible figure-human shades, wandering in pained bewilderment, perhaps lunatics, perhaps victims of similar mischance. Deeper shadows stalked them, the vile vapor forms with greedy eyes, harrying the lost toward gloomier quarters. Bessel fled onward till he sensed a Bacona brain alight, not with solitary reason, but with porous openness, a trance medium deep in seance. He hurled himself toward the glow. This was Mrs. Bullock, ample in bombazine, head cast back, hands twitching over a planchette. Around her thronged the airy rabble-spirits bucking for elbow room in her illuminated mind. Bessel fought like a drowning man, wormed fingers of thought through the pineal flare, and scratched desperate words onto the slate. George Bessel, trial, excavation, Baker Street, help, starvation. A surge of rival wills ejected him. Again darkness, drifting. One thought pounded. My body is mortal. If it perishes, my exile is eternal. He returned to Baker Street, saw the possessed shell. Tired now, in agony from some fall clambering a builder's hoarding. Stumbling, dropping out of sight into an abandoned shaft. The ghost inside him howled. At last the stolen form lay broken, whimpering. Pain, it seems, is the one tutor even devils heed. Near dawn, racked by injuries, the usurper's desire turned inward. Bessel felt the alien presence thin, loosening its clutch. With force of will he rammed the barrier once more, found a door burning, molten and plunged through. Visceral agony, the crush of torn ribs, the stench of colza. Blood hammered in ears of flesh again. The world roared with color and clamor. He sobbed gratitude even as darkness folded him into merciful faint. When rescuers hauled him up, sunlit faces swam round his cracked spectacles. Vincy, heart, a detective pale with superstition. Bessel tried to speak, but lips only bled. Later, at Dr. Hatton's nursing home, he whispered all. Fragments at first, then torrents. The tale passed from drawing-room rumour to printed pamphlet. Skeptics snorted, psychical researchers scribbled. Yet none could refute the burns upon his palms traced by invisible fire, nor the simultaneous slate writing in Paget's chambers. And for Bessel himself, life resumed a semblance of order save on moonless nights when he woke gasping, certain the invisible pain thinned, certain covetous eyes pressed against the glass. For nearly a fortnight thereafter, George Bessel lay swaddled in fever and splints, marooned between morphia dreams and the duller throb of waking pain. Each emergence into lucidity brought renewed terror that the stolen flesh might once again slip its moorings. He begged Vincy never to leave the bedside, and when the younger man dozed, he would rouse him with hoarse whispers, demanding proof of corporeal anchorage. "Pinch my arm, Ned. Harder, man, that I may feel it is my own." Dr. Hatton blamed delirium, but Vincy suspected otherwise. He, too, had tasted the queer half-touch of an invading will those nights, felt the faintest rasp of claws upon the window-pane of thought. On the 15th morning, Hatton removed the sling from Bessel's right arm. The bones knit true, yet the flesh bore curious star-shaped cicatricesa map. Vincy fancied, of some unknown constellation. That afternoon the two friends spoke gravely of what must follow. Bessel insisted the incident could not remain an anecdote tossed about psychic drawing rooms. It demanded systematic exploration. He, a wounded veteran, would be unfit for months. Vincy, hale and morbidly curious, must take the next step. "You glimpsed, however dimly, that intermediate realm," Bessel said, voice still ribboned with pain. "We must chart as Livingstone mapped the Congo, or Darwin the archipelagos, else humanity blunders blind toward an abyss." Vincy hesitated. "But what safeguard? We cannot invite another possession." "There may be natural bastions," Bessel replied. "You recall how the noxious spirits shrank from rain. Water, perhaps running water sets a barrier, a conductor of force they cannot brook." He proposed an isolation chamber at Dr. Paget's Hampstead villa, stout oak platform suspended above a shallow copper trough, kept perpetually brimming by a servant at pump. Within the flooded ring, Vincy would recline upon a wicker cot, his body tethered by silk cords, to prevent unseemly contortions. Two society observers would note every murmur, and if the clock struck the half-hour without response, Vincy must be shaken awake. Additionally, Paget sourced a coil from the Physical Society, a primitive induction apparatus, able to surround the platform with a faint, alternating field. Bessel hoped that oscillation might further discourage unwelcome ingress. Preparations consumed March. Vincy, meanwhile, practiced self-hypnosis under Bessel's tutelage. He learned to let consciousness ebb until heartbeat thundered in distant caverns and limbs tingled like wine-numbed wood. On several occasions, Bessel, seated opposite, claimed to see his pupil's outline waver as heat tremors shimmer above asphalt. Yet each time Vincy found himself snapped back by the faintest prickle-like ice water dashed in dream upon the brow. One grey Tuesday all was declared ready. The trough glistened, mirror still. The coil hummed like drowsy bumblebees. Mrs. Jacqueline, the housekeeper, hovered beyond the velvet drapes, rosary clutched. Dr. Paget wound his pocket chronometer. 8:05 precisely. Vincy lay flat, hands palm down atop the cot. He shut his eyes. Bessel, seated in a bath chair, whispered the mantra. Outside the bones, beyond the blood. 40 seconds passed. Vincy's chest moved shallowly. Thinner ripple. His right hand twitched, then stilled. A faint pallor stole over the face. Paget adjusted the lamp chimney. Bessel leaned forward. Breath hissed through clenched teeth, fearing déjà. Suddenly Vincy's lips parted. No sound emerged, but the tongue worked as though shaping foreign syllables. His fingers curled, wrapping the cot in staccato bursts. 3, 2, 3, 2. Paget jotted the sequence. Bessel perceived no malignant cloud about the body, only a curious stillness, like the hush before cathedral evensong. 5 minutes. Vincey's eyelids fluttered, yet did not open. The knocking resumed. 5 quick taps, a pause, then a long scrape as nails dragged the wicker. Bessel's gaze darted toward the threshold. Nothing. He shivered, tugged his blanket. The observers waited until the mandated half-hour elapsed. Paget leaned over and shook Vincey's shoulder. The younger man gasped violently, jolting upright. Water slopped over copper and soaked his cuffs. He stared at them in wordless astonishment, then at Bessel. "You were gone," Bessel murmured. "Where?" Vincey pressed knuckles to temples, as though bracing mind against aftershock. "A lake," he said at last, voice hoarse. A black lake under starless heavens. Yet the water shone as molten lead, and around its rime arches, great vaults of stone, but eroded, half crumbled. Through those colonnades drifted pale figures. He paused, swallowing bile. Not malignant, mournful. They glimmered like moths, and when I tried to speak, a hush enveloped me, smothering the syllables. But I felt their intent. They shepherd the dead, wardens, I suppose, of some borderland. Paget scratched furiously, eyes round as coins. "Did they address you?" "Not in words." Vincey shook his head. One pointed across the lake. He shuddered, cheeks greying. "I saw a far shore heaped with broken statues, and above, a shape vast like a cloaked titan carved of midnight. Its gaze crushed me. I fled." Bessel closed his eyes in concentration. A cloaked titan. He recalled the giant dimness, looming behind the lesser spirits during his own ordeal. Yet Vincey's mention of mourning, of guardianship, hinted at hierarchy, some order within that twilight economy. His scientist's curiosity sparked anew. During the following week, Vincey underwent 2 more projections. Each carried him deeper, along nightmare cartography. He described winding corridors of basalt honeycombed with glowworm pores, gusts of perfumed air that told of vast, unseen gardens, and once, a stair of human bones spiraling into cloud. Yet vitally he returned unharried, his body unsullied by invasive outrage. Bessel's water and coil defense appeared effective. Emboldened, they refined their plan. Vincey would attempt sustained entry, pressing beyond the lake's rim to discover if discoverable the tribunal or council that governed restless shades. He carried a mnemonic anchor, a silver vinaigrette soaked in hartshorn, clasped tight in his left hand. Should terror peak, he need only think upon the scent to wrench consciousness back along that associative tether through the funnel to corporeal birth. April 12th blossomed unseasonably fair, yet windows at Paget's villa were draped to gloom. At 9:15, Vincey slipped once more beyond waking flesh. Observers watched, pens poised, clocks ticking their indifferent rounds. Bessel, though outwardly composed, fought nausea. Each projection reopened his memory of exile. Each breath he drew reminded him how easily lungs might again be forfeited. He watched Vincey's knuckles whiten on the vinaigrette, then relax. 5 minutes, 10, no tapping. The body lay tranquil, perhaps breathing scarcely perceptible. Paget exchanged a glance of concern. He raised a Browning camera fitted with magnesium flash, ready to mark any sudden phenomena. There was none. 25 minutes crawled past like frost across pane. 30, 40. At 42 minutes, a tremor rippled Vincey's frame, the right arm extended stiffly, pointing toward the hearth. His head rotated with painful slowness, until chin almost touched shoulder, as though he peered behind through half-shut lids. Then the mouth opened. The voice that issued was cracked, sepulchral. The water fails, the coil dims, shadows pierce. Paget dropped the pen. Bessel lurched upright, forgetting his mending rib, pain sparking white. "Edward, return at once." The voice spoke again, faster, syllables clipping. "Not Vincy, not yet. Listen, George, the threshold thins. The cloaked one would parley. It names itself archivist of the between. It claims hostage your knowledge for passage to stars." Bessel's blood iced. He pressed palm to Vincy's brow. It was chill, clammy. The hand holding the vinaigrette flopped, and the silver case slid toward the trough. Paget seized Bessel's arm. "We must sever the trance." Yet dread of misstep paralyzed them. Might violence strand Vincy forever? The air prickled with static. Coil filaments glowed sullen crimson. A smell of iron ozone filled the room. Shadows about furniture lengthened, sharpening to impossible angles. And within those blades, movement worm-like wisps coiling upward, questing over the oak planks. "Water," Bessel gasped. He snatched a carafe, splashed an arc across threshold. Steam hissed where droplets met crawling darkness. The tendrils recoiled. Paget turned both induction rheostats to full. Current snarled. The copper trough rang like a gong. Vincy arched, spine bow, string taut, eyelids fluttering spasmodically. He uttered a long sigh voice unmistakably his own and sagged unconscious. The room lightened, angles retreated, coil hummed back to docility. They worked 20 minutes to revive the traveller. Hartshorn under nose, brisk palm slaps. At last he coughed, eyes brimming with terror. Bessel held a glass. Vincy drank greedily. "A parley," he whispered hoarsely. "It knew your name, George. It bartered with my memories for passage. I said nothing, yet it understood by drift of thought." He seized Bessel's lapel. "There are laws there, hieroglyphs writ in suffering. We trespass." Bessel's gaze hardened not with doubt, but resolve. "Then we must learn their dialect, mustn't we? Diplomacy begins where trespass ends." Paget protested. Mrs. Jacqueline wept. But the two investigators redoubled their preparations. May found them in Scotland, lodging at a weather-pocked manor on the Firth of Forth. Legend claimed the basement held a standing pool fed by an artesian spring older than Roman footfall, water that renews itself perpetual, as their host boasted. Here they placed Vincy's cot upon an iron raft floating inches above the pool's mirror surface. Overhead they rigged a web of Leyden jars linked to Bassett's new Tesla transformer, acquired at ghastly cost from a Glaswegian inventor. Crackling corona halos danced along brass rails whenever the switch closed. The first nights passed without event. Vincy reported only gusty darkness. The lake region lost behind starless wastes. He felt pursued, he said, by great sighing wings that ever kept beyond sight. On the fifth attempt, contact resumed. "Archivist watches," Vincy murmured. "To speak, it demands geometry angles of yielding." Bessel questioned rapidly how to render geometry. Vincy's lips moved, shaping silent maplins. Bessel snatched slate, sketched a fractal pattern of nested crescents Vincy seemed to trace on air. Light bulbs overhead blinked thrice, though the generator ran steady. Then Vincy cried out, arching violently. The pool beneath the raft stirred though no wind blew, rings spread from center to wall. Oily shadows rose atop water, sculpting vague domes. Bessel, heart hammering, hurled a dipped candle. Blue flame touched liquid and flared green ugly, chemical. The forms recoiled, sliding back beneath like sharks at harbor light. Vincy collapsed, bleeding from nose and ear. After Bessel stemmed the flow, the young man whispered, "It will come by Watergate. I saw ruin unrolling cities adrift between planets, flesh worn as costume. We bargain at peril." Bessel stroked his hand. "We bargained the moment we cracked reality's shell. Now we must finish or be devoured." He mapped frantically by daylight. Every symbol, every compass skew, Vincy recalled. The pattern resembled a labyrinth of interlocking ellipses, axis shifting as though describing orbital procession. Paget, summoned north, inspected the diagrams with morose fascination. These coordinates, If coordinates they be, point nowhere terrestrial, he muttered. Perhaps alignments for stellar gateways? That evening storm clouds rolled seaward. Vincy begged respite, but Bessel insisted. At dusk the manor lightning rod hummed, purple forks jabbed horizon. Vincy, dosed but determined, reclined upon the raft, slate at hand to copy signs into chalk dust upon the iron deck. Bessel stood on stone stair observing through spyglass aperture. Minutes crawled, no movement. Thena pop, transformer sparks leapt an inch longer, whining like wasps. The slate toppled from Vincy's lax grip. His fingers danced in air, conducting invisible symphony. Upon the pool surface, cymatics formed. Concentric polygons, each side flexing, unrolling into spirals that crawled toward raft hull. Bessel, galvanized, activated emergency coilan, added loop, designed to throw random phase noise across field. The polygons shivered, shattered into confused ripples. Vincy gasped, chest heaving, eyes fluttering as though reading blinding script. A Voisinode Vincy seminated, echoing cavern deep despite small chamber. Archivist receives distortion. Parley aborted. Send courier of flesh. With that the pool erupted, black column roiling up. Crowned by arch of glassy water, within which writhed emaciated masks gnashing soundlessly. Bessel shrieked, lurching back. Lightning struck rod. Current grounded through pool. The column flashed violet, then collapsed in torrent. Vincy spat water, convulsed, and lay still. Alarm bell rang, servants rushed. Paget arrived, clutching smelling salts. Vincy lived weak pulse but steady. The incident ended parley attempts. Yet Bessel's curiosity morphed from diplomatic to defensive. How to seal gateways already prized ajar. He consulted mineralogists, mesmerists, even a Jesuit librarian versed in apocrypha. Common threads emerged: salt, running water, resonant vibration. He devised portable Wards-glass vials of saline suspended in Faraday rings, tiny tuning forks pitched to coil frequency. If mankind must contend with extradimensional incursion, at least early warning and first aid might be contrived. Summer passed in fevered scholarship. Bessel's injuries healed, his resolve hardened. Vincy recovered slowly, plagued by nightmares of bone stairs winding towards silent trial. Yet he persisted, noting symbols glimpsed in dream, feeding Bessel's growing treatise on hypersomatic parasitism and measures thereof. By September advance, copies circulated among Royal Society minds. Many scoffed, but a handful Kelvin, Crookes, Lodge responded with cautious intrigue. Crookes dispatched a note offering cathode tube equipment to test permeability of subtle emanations. Funding trickled. Then on equinox night, as harvest moon bled over Hampstead, police reported a spate of disturbances. Spontaneous fires in empty attics, sleepers roused to find walls streaming with foul dew, a milkman driven senseless by vision of faces in the glass. Bessel toured sites, every house perched precisely on a line connecting symbol, nodes Vincy had drawn. The geometry was activating, with or without consent. The final conflict gathered momentum. Bessel, Vincy, Paget, and a handful of chosen allies fortified the Albany, converting rooms into resonating chambers. Tesla coils hummed, water fountains circled corridors, salt granules stitched thresholds. They awaited the archivist's courier, whatever form it might assume. On Michaelmas Eve it came. Vincy, posted at north window, saw Piccadilly shimmer as though viewed through kiln heat, traffic frozen mid-motion. A tall silhouette emerged 7 feet at least, robed in darkness that sucked lamplight. It advanced without footfall, crossing pavement, ignoring gawping constables. Where it passed, iron railheads curdled, paint bubbled, and blossoms wilted instant. The thing reached Albany Gate, halted by line of salt. It extended handless sleeves. Within swirled nebular dust wherein faint constellations winked. A voice vibrated pains. Archivist claims the breach. Deliver Geometer Bessel for Congress beyond. Inside, coils screamed as voltage ramped. Bessel, trembling yet resolute, stepped to vestibule where Vincy barred oak door. I must meet it, Bessel said. Dialogue or death no middle road. Vincy would not yield. Others surrounded Hawser. Taut. Then a smaller figure appeared behind the courier-own of those mournful guardians Vincy had first observed. It raised translucent palm, touched the courier's cloak. Sparks hissed. The tall shadow recoiled as though burnt. An unspoken contest flared forces flexing like magnetic fields in rivalry. Bessel sensed petition. The wardens appealed for alliance. In a flash he understood. Not all inhabitants of Between sought invasion. Some labored to maintain quarantine. He seized Vincy's hand, dragged him before windows. Together they lifted a tuning fork tuned to coil pitch, struck it upon marble plinth. Resonance cascaded into network. Copper veins sang. Air thickened with humming pressure. Outside, the courier's robe shredded into ribbons of starlight sucked back toward vacancy. It released a soundless wail and dissipated, leaving scorch marks upon flagstones shaped like fractured mandalas. The guardian figure bowed from neck or waist, none could say than folded in upon itself, becoming gust that drifted upward and winked out among chimney pots. Street motion resumed. Cab driver cursed his stalled horse, oblivious of eclipse seconds prior. Weeks later, Bessel and Vincy stood on the Isle of Skye, cliffs shearing into Atlantic spray. They had come not for rest, but to inter Wilson Paget's ashes. The doctor succumbed to congestion of lungs agitated by months of coil vapor. Among the mourners were Crooks and Lodge, their skepticism eroded like shale under tides. A stiff wind carried smell of kelp. Gannets wheeled. Bessel spoke. Paget glimpsed only margins of truth, yet gave his life. Let the record show science marches not by petri dish alone, but by effrontery of spirit. Vincy placed a slate amid cairn stones engraved with labyrinth geometry now scored through by diagonal cross. Barrier holds, he said quietly. But geometry persists elsewhere. We must teach safeguards. Bessel nodded. A league of vigilance across nations, coils in lighthouses, salt at borders of dream. They gazed west where sun dipped fire into sea, pondering continents beyond horizon and heavens beyond that. Realms where archivists tallied star tithes, where bone stairs climbed to silent verdicts. England behind them bustled unaware, yet in quiet corners laboratory coils crackled, water wheels churned holy circuits, and vials of saline winked beneath bedside lampstokens of fragile dominion. Some nights, when autumn mist thickened, George Bessel still felt a faint skitter of eyes against the glass of mind. He would smile a weary, seasoned smile and murmur. Outside the bones, beyond the blood, but not unguarded. Then he turned to new equations, redrawing, refining, ever vigilant, ever human. For 3 seasons, the Vigilance League toiled in half-secret, stringing its resonant wires through telegraph arrays and fitting river locks with brass sluices that could be snapped open to flood entire culverts, should malign vapors seep upward. Crooks adapted his cathode tubes into portable analyzers, palm-sized bulbs that glowed lavender when between radiance, thickened beyond a tolerable quotient. Along docklands from Hamburg to Halifax, one glimpsed lamplighters in brown serge overcoats, tapping such bulbs against gas standard squiat sentinels measuring the unseen tide. Bessel lectured where doors would open, choosing iron foundry halls over university cloisters, for skilled workmen grasped at once the peril of metal that might become portal instead of shield. He spoke without flourish, displaying a single lantern slide. Paget's scorched courtyard flagstones, the fractured mandala etched by the archivist's aborted ingress. He concluded with a Smith's oath rather than scripture. Hot steel quenched wrong, bends double. So with civilization temper, else it warps. Skepticism waned when Glasgow's Karen works erupted one humid July. Witnesses described a column of blue-black flame that roared from blast furnace throat, writhing into vaguely serpentine arcs before the roof collapsed. Dozens perished, yet investigators found no shards of boilerplate, No fallen girder and tire tons of iron had vanished, volatilized into some unknown phase. Bessel's tubes, waved above the smoking crater, shone violet until glass sagged. Parliament authorized funds the following week. Vinci, however, remained restless. His dreams circled the Black Lake with obsessive gravity. The cloaked archivist lurked at his mind's horizon like a moon eclipsed yet unforgotten. He feared one truth more than any spectral siege, that the lake was not merely locus, but Hingian umbilicus connecting human consciousness to the inhuman calculus beyond. Unless the hinge could be locked, future generations would inherit a door forever rattling on its chain. In October, he journeyed to Brittany, accompanied by Eleanor Hart Thomas, Hart's younger sister whose mathematical acumen and fearless temperament had impressed both men during League Congress. Locals near Karnak muttered of dream sickness and livestock found exsanguinated beside ancient dolmens. At night, those monoliths hummed, said fishermen, like bees inside a jar. Vinci suspected resonance with the same lattice that had scorched Scottish stones. They pitched a canvas shelter amid wind-gnarled pines, staking copper rods into granite soil. Eleanor tuned her portable Tesla Harp 5 arched wires strung above an induction coil that could be hand-cranked to any harmonic between 40 and 200 hertz. On the third dusk, the dolmens answered, low vibrations swelling until the very sky seemed to quiver like cloth upon vast organ pipes. Vinci, wearing cedar earplugs, felt pressure behind eyes. Eleanor staggered, bleeding from one nostril yet kept turning the crank, matching pitch for pitch. Suddenly the hum fractured into echoes racing outward over heath. Between two stones, a shimmer congealedan oval of glassy luminance perhaps 6 feet high. Through it they glimpsed charcoal clouds scudding above black water. Vinci's heart clenched. The lake. He hurled a salt, charged grenade-simple earthenware jar packed with brine crystals and chlorate. It burst white, clouding the oval. Steam shrieked. The aperture imploded with a sonorous thud that toppled both experimenters. When smoke cleared, the dolmen faces were slagged, their quartz veining melted to greenish glass. The League deemed the site neutralized. Yet Eleanor shivered whenever November rain drummed fenestrations, claiming she heard distant chanting beneath thunder. News arrived from New York. Nikola Tesla himself wished audience. He had noted anomalous interference-eragged halo discharges around Wardenclyffe Tower, each time Bessel's European coils engaged. If transatlantic sympathy already existed, he reasoned, coordinated counter-oscillation might stitch a far wider screen. Bessel and Vinci embarked midwinter on the liner Teutonic. Crossing proved turbulent. Atlantic storms battered hull and wrenched deck. Plates. During the worst onset, Bessel awoke to find seawater sluicing cabin floor despite closed porthole. It shimmered with dim cerulean sparkstony motes swirling like drowned fireflies. He thrust a silver thermometer bulb into the puddle. Mercury spiked, though water lay freezing to the touch. Dawn revealed nothing amiss, yet planks retained faint scorch marks in branching filigree. Wardenclyffe loomed austere against snow-patched scrub. Tesla greeted them in faintly luminous overcoat, hair electric at perpetual attention. He ushered them beneath the tower where coils tall as organ pipes slept beneath tarpaulin. Earth itself vibrates, he murmured, accent rolling like distant Adriatic. We shall teach her to cough these ghosts from throat. They labored fortnight, synchronizing League harmonics with Tesla's global resonance frequency. At last all aligned. Switches through. Current burst skyward, a heliotrope spear punching ozone. Elsewhere, League stations echoed. Edinburgh, Hamburg, Calcutta. Nagasaki answered with rising crescendos. For 3 minutes the planet rang like struck bell. Compasses wobbled, auroras blossomed beyond polar rim, and countless night watchers swore they heard colossal chord humming in marrow. Vigilance tubes, however, glowed only faint rosier good sign. Tesla exhaled long, smiled cryptically. Barometer of devilry falls, he said. Yet Bessel cautioned euphoria. Storms often lull before cyclonic eye. Indeed, January reports seemed encouraging. No firewind horrors, no bronze-eating vapors. Factories resumed double shifts. Investigative funds threatened to wither under complacency. Then, on Candlemas Eve, Munich's Isar River boiled spontaneously, ejecting thousands of trout already filleted by heat unknown. Witness sketches showed serpentine plumes of shadow rising above water, coiling to form cruciform arrays before dissipating. League tubes in Austrian border stations turned nihilistic black, glass darkening as though mourning. Bessel convened emergency telegraph. Pattern analysis by Eleanor Hart revealed epicenter nodes matching not the lake geometry, but the inversia negative stencil the archivist might employ to dissolve the newly forged lattice. If correct, every counter-oscillation risked punching aligned holes wherever water coursed under geomantic lines. Rhine, Nile, Ganges. Earth's arteries had become siege tunnels. A council at Wardenclyffe argued bitterly. Tesla proposed doubling field strength to overwhelm interference. Lodge pleaded for retreat, citing risk to magnetosphere itself. Bessel, fatigued to bone, listened while mapping Isar incident overlays. Then he saw Iton unbroken chain of rivers, springs, and artesian faults forming voyage from Black Forest to Atlantic, perfect corridor towards St. George's Channel and onward to London. The archivist had not ceased. It maneuvered. Vinci suggested daring incursion. He would re-enter between, guided by guardian wardens if possible, to locate source of inverse geometry and sabotage from within. Everyone objected body still bore labyrinthine bruises from Karnak Butt, he insisted. Better spy inside citadel than batter blindly at curtain walls. They prepared chamber below, Wardenclyffe circular pool lined with silver leaf. Tesla coils shaped into spiral-nested rings. Prototype respirator fed by oxygen flask would keep Vinci's corporeal lungs inflated should trance extend hours. Eleanor soldered fail-safe triggers. If heart fell beneath threshold, coil algorithm would invert polarity, jolting spirit back or shredding lattice within. Whichever came first. Mid-March moon rode ragged clouds. Vinci lay upon teak float, fingers steady on vinaigrette. He thought of Bessel, of Eleanor's quick smile, of Paget's dead eyes, then relinquished anchor. His body slackened. Respirator ticked. Observers waited. 10 minutes. Nothing. 20. Tubes flickered pale green. 33. Coil harmonic slid half key downward. Wardenclyffe Tower thrummed, sparks cascading. Bessel tightened straps across Vinci's chest as tachygraph traced erratic ascents. 45. Sulphurous gust swept hall, extinguishing lamps yet leaving coil effulgent. Within gloom a silhouette formed smaller than archivist courier, robed not in darkness but translucent dusk. Bessel sensed Warden's presence. Sentinel, maybe ally. The shape spoke within skulls rather than air. Your envoy seeks vault of inverse angle. We shall guide until threshold he cannot breach alone. Bessel implored permission to aid. Voice replied, only he who trod lake may pass shallow of bone. Then figure dissipated into streaming motes that entered Vinci's supine form at crown of head. Machines screamed a chord of tortured copper. Tubes pulsed crimson, then gold color unseen before. Bessel prayed, yet refused to activate failsafe. 3 interminable hours passed. Coil temperature scorched gloves. At last, a shudder. Vinci convulsed, vomited black bile smelling of iron and violets. Eyes opened, pupils dilated unto iris rim. He whispered. Vault destroyed arc turned upon itself. Archivist sundered, but fracture widens. We must seal with concord of waters. He gestured weakly toward tower blueprint. Tesla, trembling, deciphered. Broadcast tri-phase pulse at precise lunar zenith to stitch aqueous conduits with antiphase ripples, welding seam by resonance rather than brute amplitude. They had 48 hours before widening tier reached Rhine Delta. Teams telegraphed coordinates. Operators at each league pool gun dynamos. Eleanor calibrated master oscillator. Tesla tuned secondary rotor. At zenith, coil blazed argent white, surrounding snow vaporized, leaving crater of fused sand. World hummed, seismographs writhed, yet cities stood. Silence afterward felt cosmic. Tubes cooled to transparent Claritino ghostlit haze. Rivers flowed ordinary grey-green. Bessel allowed himself tears. Weeks of monitoring showed disturbances flatlined. Munich rebuilt. Karen resumed casting. Wardenclyffe's upper corona mast remained warped, a cautionary reliquary. Funding inquiries ceased, but the League kept skeleton watch. Coils maintained monthly whisper. Fountains never ran dry of brine. Vinci recovered slowly, hearing faint surf even miles inland. He and Eleanor wed that autumn. Ceremony small, conductorless but for distant gulls and quiet coil hum like subdued organ prelude. Bessel locked final manuscript 2 volumes thick, diagrams dense inside Geological Society vault. He titled it, The Waters Between Worlds. His last chapter ended. The hinge can be reforged, yet metal remembers every bend. Let no generation forget tension of that clasp, lest it snap anew. Sometimes, alone near midnight, he gazed from Albany balcony down at gaslights shimmering along Piccadilly. Normalcy paraded omnibuses rumbled. Laughter wafted from supper clubs, yet he discerned deeper cadence. Planetary heartbeat, retuned by their desperate symphony. He would tip his hat to unseen wardens pacing silent colonnades of some other shore and retreat inside before dew settled, whispering to empty room, keep watch with us until flesh and shadow reconcile beneath kinder sky. The towers grew quiet. Deep within the wardrooms of the Vigilance League, Bessel insisted on an audit not of coils and relays, but of memories. We are trained to measure instruments, he said. Less often do we gauge the state of imagination, yet it is through imagination the archivist first slipped its nail beneath our world's veneer. So began the recollection census. Volunteers dock hands, telegraph clerks, mathematicians, midwives set down every dream, déjà vu, or inexplicable scent that pricked their waking hours. The returns filled wooden crates. Eleanor compiled them into a stitched chart of colored pins, red for nightmares of the Black Lake, blue for cool drafts that seemed to blow from nowhere, gold for inexplicable elations at dusk. Patterns surfaced and faded like shoals in a green sea. No cluster hinted at a renewed breach. Yet, in March of the new year, a single crimson pin appeared in the most unexpected quarter Swansea, on Wales's industrial coast. A slate quarryman reported a vision of river water folding upward into glassy spires. 3 nights later, a schoolmistress in the same town dreamed of standing on a basalt floor, listening to unseen turbines revolve under her ribs. Nothing else occurred. The tube stayed clear. The coils did not flicker. Bessel nevertheless took a slow train west. Swansea's hillsides were scarred with spoil heaps and slag. Their dark silhouettes resembled overturned barges at ebb tide. A smell of burnt sugar drifted from a copper smelting plant. Bessel found the quarryman Owen Meredith Jones chiseling neat runnels in an adit wall. The man greeted him without surprise. "You're the mine doctor," he said in rolling Welsh English. "Come see what I chipped this morning." Behind the adit's rusted tram rails lay a pocket of slate, so flawless it reflected the inspection lamp like black mercury. Across that mirror spilled a lace of silver filaments, each no wider than a human hair. They ran in angles too precise for geology. "Veins?" Bessel asked. "Not slate-borne," Jones answered. "I hear them hum after sunset." Bessel pressed a Crookes tube to the filaments. No luminescence. He drew a brass stylus and touched the lattice. A faint warmth, then the stylus snagged, as though bitten, and he recoiled. The filaments had retracted. Jones stepped back, crucifix glinting at his throat. "I've quarried slate 30 years, he muttered. "Rock doesn't twitch." Bessel scoured the cavity edge. Tiny pinholes remained where the silver lines had retreated, each ringed by quartz that looked newly molten. He pocketed samples and hurried to the rail station, telegraphing Wardenclyffe. Tesla's reply, "Observe, but do not energize." Could be residual self-repair. Bessel read it twice. Self-repair. So the archivist, though sundered still, pulsed somewhere through Earth's conductive marrow. For 6 months, nothing further stirred. Spring hawthorn blossomed along riverbanks. The Vigilance League reduced shifts to fortnightly watches. Newspapers cartooned Bessel as the ghost chaser, half derision, half fondness. Only Vinci remained uneasy. Recuperation had left him leaner, but his eyes held a brightness like arc lamp carbons. He borrowed Eleanor's logarithmic tables and calculated tidal harmonics when he ought to have slept. "Water is their road," he would whisper, "but water is ours too." He proposed a network of resonant sluice, gator-stuned shutters to break any emerging coherence inside Earth's aquifers. The Treasury balked at cost. The Navy demurred. Still, Eleanor drew drafts. One fog-bound dawn, Bessel reached the Albany portico to find a slim envelope bearing a red wax sigil he did not recognize. A tiny eye within a gear. Inside, a single sentence in spidery ink. The archivist was never alone. No signature, no address. That evening, Bessel convened Vinci, Eleanor, and Thomas Hart. They spread maps beneath lamp glow. Bessel recounted the letter, the Swansea filaments. Hart rubbed his brow. An imitator, perhaps some German mystic society. Or a warning, said Vinci. 3 nights later, Swansea's Lufour estuary flashed bluer silence pierced by single boom like a drum under miles of water. Morning found fish, bleached white along mudflats, their scales etched by the same silver lattice Jones had witnessed in slate. Telegraphed reports followed, twinned flashes on the Firth of Tay, a murmuring fog over Antwerp docks, a glow beneath St. Lawrence ice that shattered fishing barges without wave or wind. The lattice was migrating through salt line seeking, probing. Tesla cabled a single imperative. Seal water. Gates. The League's reduced skeletons surged to life. Crews dumped slag into canal locks, packed powdered lime into culverts. Yet rivers are difficult masters. Blocking one mouth sends current rushing elsewhere. Within days, the Danube near Vienna rose 2 meters, bursting embankments. In its churned silt gleamed those nerve-silver threads, drifting like spiderweb. Not breach, Vinci said. Jaw tight. Recruitment. They're weaving themselves from ions. But to what end? Eleanor asked. Bessel glanced toward a wall, calendar and astronomer's ephemeris. 2 weeks hence, total lunar eclipse. He touched the date with ink, smudged finger. Eclipse is between's natural tide. They mean to ride that shadow, perhaps, to unlace the whole shell we have forged. Tesla concurred. Wardenclyffe's pendulums recorded faint but rising tremor in Schumann resonance bands. The planet's cavity ringed like a goblet long before lips meet rim. There remained one untested defense, Vinci's sluice gate array, now half-built along Thames and Severn. Eleanor believed even incomplete segments might generate a standing wave of cavitation-tiny voids, collapsing faster than any lattice could heal. Treasury released emergency funds. Ironworks clanged day and night. Entire trainloads of steel plates crossed England under armed guard. Women of the munitions corps riveted shutter panels with hurricane speed. Bessel oversaw node calibration at Barking Creek. The spectre of the archivist haunted his periphery, but he no longer felt dreadingly a grim stewardship. If minds had opened the wound, minds must stitch it. 14th June. Overcast skies. Eclipse due well, after dusk over the Atlantic, but its penumbral hush seemed already to settle. Crook's tubes atop Wardenclyffe glowed faint amethyst. At 1,600 hours sluice gate line 1 trial fired. Estuary water churned white. Tidal flow hesitated, then resumed laminar. Instruments recorded sharp drop in between. Radiance. Cheer rippled. Engineers advanced schedule, powering additional gates. At 1,840, a transmission crackled from Antwerp, station barely legible under static. Filaments receding, but something under harbour floor flexing crustal bulge ascend. Signal cut. Seismographs in Edinburgh twitched. Microquakes along European littoral. Vinci cursed softly. They'll lift the seabed if denied rivers. Eleanor suggested derating power to avoid driving them seaward. Tesla disagreed. Partial pressure might form concentrated jets. Bessel, watching storm clouds bruise horizon, realized the truth they did not know enough. Planetary hydraulics were a winged labyrinth. Any lever could turn blade back upon handler. He voiced compromise. Run gates in pulsed cadence opening and closing like colossal valves in hope of confounding lattice pattern recognition. Tesla recalculated nodes. Eleanor coded timing sequence on punched tapes. Operators braced. 1901. First cadence cycle. London's tide lights blinked as water surged, then ebbed twice within a minute. Thames steamers yawing on their hawsers. At Swansea, the estuary lay eerily still. Crook's tubes around the league leapt from violet to diamond clear for a full 30-second shyest purity reading yet recorded. Hope soared until 1914, when every tube in Glasgow snapped black. Simultaneously, a roar like distant artillery rolled from the Clyde. Telautograph ink scribbled wild seismogram loops. Orders shouted, whistles screamed. Before lines cut, a final telegraph ticked. River reversed water, pouring seaward something rising. Sluicegate 4 seized as cavitation tore bearings. Iron plates buckled, sending foamy vortices sky high. Within them writhed glints of living wire. Vinci slammed manual lock. Actuator bolts sheared like putty. The gate clanged open. A column of water rose 50 feet, carrying silver webs that flared into geometric fans, then narrowed, braiding themselves around swirling void. Observers fled the diary slick banks. Bessel steadied his monocular. Through spray he glimpsed shaped octahedra nested within each other, spinning at impossible speed. They reminded him of snowflakes glimpsed under polarized light only, alive, seeking anchor. Archivist's heirs, he murmured. Lightning snapped, unheralded, striking the water column. Ionic discharge blossomed. The lattice hissed into steam. The thunderclap battered windows for miles. The column collapsed, drenching docklands in brackish rain. Picket fences of radiant tubes sputtered, then cleared. Across Britain, telegraphs signaled similar burst columns, forming then detonated by their own electrical appetite. Perhaps the planet, newly tuned, had denied them stable frequency. Night deepened. Eclipse shadow crawled across Atlantic, yet holotype events waned. By 2000, 300 hours tubes rested clear, coils silent. Tesla exhaled into glowing cigarette, shaking hands visible only then. In the weeks after, the rivers behaved. Fishermen cast nets without finding etched scales. Swansea quarries' silver veins faded to leaden dust. The League, though weary, relaxed its watch but not its learning. Bessel argued vigilance must become culture, not project. Governments appropriated funds for permanent hydro-resonant sentry lines and psychical hygiene bureaus. Vinci's hair, once peppered chestnut, had greyed at temples. He and Eleanor relocated to a modest Sussex villa beside chalk downs where aquifers ran shallow. There they raised twin daughters who listened to coil hum lullabies before bedtime. Vinci would walk them to hillside barrow mounds and show them simple pendulums he'd built. When the pendulums swung steady, the world was in tune. When they jittered, Papa must send telegrams. Bessel turned increasingly to mentorship. He published Contours of the Invisible Continuum, blending rigorous observation with ethical caution. When you open a gate, ask first who yearns hardest to step through. Reviewers alternately praised and ridiculed, yet within 5 years most European physics faculties offered elective lectureships in border resonancy. Late in life, he revisited the Black Lake alone. The place looked ordinary, as any tarn under autumn sunreed beds, dragonflies, a heron lifting into blue air. He stood on shale shore, Crook's tube in hand, pale as gin. He felt no malign, stare only the lake's indifferent glimmer. He uncorked flask of Thames water, poured a libation, and spoke softly. To whatever listens, we remember the bend. He waited. Breeze rustled sedge. Then, satisfied, he turned toward path home, leaving behind merely ripples that lapped shingle like closing pages of a book.